Does Peef eat tofu? Find out on today's episode. Welcome to Crocs in the Kitchen.
I'm Brian.
And I'm Jessica.
Today we are making crispy baked Italian tofu.
When we first switched to a whole food plant-based diet, I will admit tofu freaked me out quite a bit. I didn't really know what it was. All I heard all my life was that it was bland and tasteless and spongy and weird and I don't know.
I had no clue how to cook it or deal with it in any way, shape, or form.
But people kept telling me that it could be made tasty, and so I kind of put that in the back of my mind. Then one day we were eating these Trader Joe's riced cauliflower bowls, and we actually have a separate video. We did a review just of that product. It's a frozen entree, but it's actually quite good, and it has tofu in it. And that was the first time I actually ate tofu where I went, oh wow, tofu can taste really good. It's the highlight of the dish to me. And so after that, I was bound and determined to try out some tofu and figure out how to make it taste good.
So after that happened, I contacted my friend Sheffy, who is a chef who lived in Thailand for a good long while. And I asked him, hey, what is something that I could do with tofu to actually make it really, really good? And so he actually gave me some really good advice. And just to give him a little plug, you should check out his podcast, the Food of the Day podcast. It is absolutely hilarious, and I'm the producer for that as well. So as we were determined to make some tofu, we went out and bought some. And this led to Jessica's other frightening discovery.
So apparently tofu is packaged in water, which I always knew that you had to press it and remove the water. I guess I just assumed the water was in the tofu. I didn't realize that it was like sitting in this weird pool of tofu water, which just kind of freaked me out even more.
So the water actually comes from the process by which tofu is made. First, what they do is they take soybeans and they turn them into soy milk. And they take the soy meal and they sell that off. And they take the soy milk and they add a coagulant. The coagulant turns the soy milk into soy curds. The soy curds are then pressed into the familiar blocks that we know and love today.
But that still doesn't explain why is it packaged in water.
They're packaged in water because it maintains the freshness and it also helps it maintain its bulk. If you just have tofu out and the water is allowed to sort of naturally separate, it will decrease in size, and they don't want to have that. So yeah, they package it full of water.
Weird. So after I got out the initial being freaked out by tofu, I realized that it's actually quite delicious if you prepare it in the right way. Brian, as you know, likes to mess around with his spice blends.
Yep. And
we had been making veggie pizzas once a week, maybe once every other week we'll make a veggie pizza. And we wanted something to replace the quote-unquote meat on the pizza. And so we thought, what if we chop the tofu into cubes and season it with Italian seasoning?
Yeah, to make it sort of have that really nice Italian sausagey kind of flavor. And I think that it turned out great. For this recipe, you will need fennel seed, cayenne pepper, garlic powder, smoked paprika, Italian seasoning, and for the liquid ingredients, you will need liquid aminos and coconut aminos.
And of course, you'll need tofu. So we like to use the Trader Joe's organic sprouted tofu, and it is extra firm as well.
So the first thing that you want to do is cut your tofu. Cut your tofu into 8 different pieces, about a 1/2 inch thick slice. We use a 15.5 ounce package of Trader Joe's extra firm organic sprouted grain tofu. But you can use anything that is extra firm or firm, depending on whatever it is that you actually like. So cut the block into 8 different pieces, place between some paper towels or some tea towels, and put something heavy on top of it and get all of that water out. And press it for at least 20 minutes. You can go longer if you want, but you don't necessarily have to.
Or if you don't want to use the janky setup that we have, you could also buy a tofu press.
While your tofu is pressing and getting all of that water out of there so you can get some flavor into it, you need to develop those flavors that you want to be in your tofu. So what I like to do is actually toast some fennel seed. How do you toast fennel seed? Same way you toast any other seed. You get a really, really hot pan in the medium high to high range and get it really, really hot. And then you can put in your half teaspoon of fennel and toast it seriously for like 10 seconds, 15 at the absolute most, because this stuff will burn really quickly if you aren't careful. You could do it lower and slower if you wanted to, but I like to do things quick and get it done fast. But toast your fennel and then immediately get it off and allow it to cool.
After you toast up the fennel seed, you're going to want to grind it up since it's the full seed. So we like to put all the spices into our coffee grinder. We actually don't drink coffee, but we bought a coffee grinder specifically to grind up spices and flaxseed and other stuff like that. So we measure all of the seasonings into the coffee grinder and then grind it up. You're going to need, in addition to the half teaspoon of toasted fennel, you'll need a tablespoon of Italian seasoning, a dash of cayenne pepper, a dash of smoked paprika, and a half teaspoon of garlic powder. So after you get all that in, you will grind it up for probably about 20 to 30 seconds at the most until it is a fine powder.
If you don't have a coffee grinder to grind up your fennel and seasonings, you can use a food processor or a blender. If you don't have a small cup attachment for your blender, you may have to actually just make extra fennel. Or, if you really want to skip this entire step, you can as well. You don't necessarily need to do it. You can throw the fennel straight in. It's just that you won't get that good kick of flavor on your tofu.
So after you have all your spices ground up, you will add the wet ingredients. We forgot to film, of course, us adding the wet ingredients. You'll want about 3 tablespoons of wet ingredients total. We use a tablespoon of liquid aminos and 2 tablespoons of coconut aminos. You can actually use any combination of those as long as it's 3 tablespoons total. You can also use low sodium soy sauce or even vegetable broth, but the vegetable broth won't give it as concentrated of a flavor. Once you have all the wet ingredients measured into the dry ingredients, grab your tiny whisk, which by the way was one of our top 10 kitchen tools and gadgets from our video we released earlier this week, so you might want to check that out. We'll link that below. And then you just want to whisk together the dry and wet ingredients until they're all incorporated.
So once your marinade is done and thoroughly mixed together, set it aside and grab the tofu, which should have been pressing this whole time. And what you want to do is chop it up into about 1/2-inch cubes. Very simple. You just stack the pieces together, generally 4 and 4, cut them into strips, and then cut them into cubes. Once you've got your tofu chopped up into 1/2-inch cubes, put it into a Ziploc bag. Once it's in the Ziploc bag, go ahead and pour in your marinade and blow a little air into the bag and shake it up thoroughly and get it very, very well coated. After that, put it on a flat surface and remove as much air as possible and get it down to one flat layer. After that, you can stick it in the refrigerator and let it sit in there for, I would say, a minimum of 4 hours, but you can leave it in there for more than a day if you want. So when you are ready to bake your tofu, set your oven at 375 and let's get this thing together. Take your tofu out of the refrigerator and put it onto a baking sheet. As you can see, we have these fancy silpats from France.
If you don't have a silicone baking mat, you can also use parchment paper. But since we're cooking without oil here, it's really important to have either the silicone baking mat or parchment paper so that it doesn't stick.
So make sure that your tofu is in an even layer on the baking sheet. As you can see, we've got corners exposed. Make sure that you don't have any tofu on those corners because those will stick and they will be a little bit more of a pain to get off. Make sure that everything is on the parchment paper or the silicone baking mat and it'll make your life a lot easier. Once it's good and spread out and you can see that there's gaps between the pieces because we want as much hot air circulating them as possible, place them into your 375-degree oven for 40 minutes.
Halfway through, get it out and stir it up a bit and then put it back in.
You can stir it more times if you want, like every 10 minutes. It will get a little bit crispier if you do it that way. We just prefer it in sort of a nice medium, kind of meaty texture. And that comes from only stirring it once in the middle. Once it's done, take it out of the oven and let it sit and cool off.
You can try it right out of the oven and it'll taste good, but after you let it cool for 10 or 15 minutes, this magic thing happens to it and it sort of gets this nice chewy, almost, I feel like it's almost caramelized or something, texture to it, and it tastes amazing.
Yes, it definitely turns out really nice. It gets a sort of a crunchy exterior with a nice chewy interior that's got a bit of resistance to it, and it's just phenomenal. Like, just amazing.
We store this in a glass Pyrex container in our refrigerator, and it will keep for 3 or 4 days.
So there you go, crispy baked Italian tofu. And as you can see, it didn't actually make it to this part of the filming. We actually ate it all. Yeah, sorry about that. It's just that good.
Now is when we would normally taste it, but
you will be able
just trust
to,
us. It was good.
You can see pictures of it on the blog post, and
Yes.
yeah, it's super good, and it's got a little bit of a crunch to it. It's a bit chewy, and it's got that great Italian seasoning and that great fennel flavor. All in all, it's one of the best things that I think that I've ever come up with, and that's saying a lot.
I've came up with.
Considering the smoky hummus recipe that we've developed.
You did it all by yourself.
Well, hey, this was all my spice blend, so I'm taking credit for this one.
The key to this is definitely letting it cool down. When this first comes out of the oven, you grab a piece, you eat it, you're like, okay, that's good. But then if you just let it sit for like 10 or 15 minutes, it transforms and becomes crispier and chewy and magical. And that's when you just need to put it in a container and put it away right away, or you will eat it all.
Yep. So that's it. That's all we got for this one. Be sure to subscribe to our channel and click the bell notification. Also, check out the blog post. Jessica puts a lot of time and effort into making that come about, and I think it's exceptionally well done. But, I am her husband, so...
You can also get the full recipe for this in the blog, and also don't forget to check us out on social media. All the links for that are in the description for this video.
Yep. That's all I got.
That's all I got.
So we will see you next time. Bye-bye.
Wait, did we find out if Peep likes tofu?